Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Philly Factor. I'm your host, Paul Perrello. My next guest, I'm sure, has heard every joke that there is in the book when it comes to magic. But from what I understand, from some of the reviews that I have read about Robert Malissa, is some of the people saying the most fun I had during my trip to Philly, filled with surprise, a combination of humor, magic, and some cool old city facts, a magical history tour. But what Robert does, which is so unique, is he works in history with a lot of magic. Robert, I want to thank you for spending some time with us here on the program.
Thank you, Paul.
Kiddingly, before we started, I said I wasn't going to ask Robert to pull a rabbit out of his hat, but I'm sure, I don't know if that's part of the tour or not, but I'm sure you hear that and get that a lot.
Sure, for sure. Yeah, but I get him started right away and we keep going. I don't give him a chance to ask.
So, what's this? I mean, we've done a number of shows where we have interviewed people that have run everything from ghost tours to candlelight tours to every type of tour of Old City that there is. I think what you have done is you have sort of tapped into the desire for history, but have done it in a very unique way, something I've never seen before. So, what made you uh, blend magic with history and come up with your brilliant tour?
Oh, thanks for that description. But it started because I'm a lifelong magician. I started at age 10, and there is a magician in Bath, England, who created the Bizarre Bath Walk, which is a walking magic tour of the city. And I actually took that tour with my family. And I spoke to him then at a magic convention years later and told him I was interested in doing it and asked him all sorts of questions about it. And what he does is uses the city as a backdrop, but he doesn't use the history of it. And when I decided to put this together, being a native of Philly, walking around Old City, you can't not use the history. So I boned up on a lot of the history and I was looking for unusual facts, just one or two very interesting things, and then try and blend that with the magic. And it was a bit of a challenge. It took me 2 years walking around north, south, east, and west from the Bourse because I knew I wanted to start there because there's public bathrooms and a place to get some drinks and stuff. And then from there, cobble together, which would be about an hour, a half-hour walk, 1 mile, and a nice tour. So it took a long time to come up with the presentations and the tricks and build my props and create a cart and all the other things I had to do. But at the end, I think it's come out to be a very nice blend.
Yeah, I'm reading many of the reviews about your tour. People are thoroughly entertained by it, and perhaps they come away with a little bit of history of Philadelphia. I want to go back because you said you started with magic at the age of 10, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
So, do you remember what your first magic trick was at that age of 10?
Well, it was really a book that I took out of the Northeast Regional Library called Fun with Magic by Joseph Lehman. And a lot of magicians can go back to that book. And at age 10, you read through, it was like 8 tricks. And I learned all 8 tricks. And at the end, it said, you now have to perform these. So I asked my mom, hey, I gotta do a show somewhere. So she called my cousin who was 6, and my aunt said, yeah, you can do a birthday party for your 6-year-old cousin. So my mom gave me a little blue alligator makeup case, and I put my 7 tricks in there. And I went off to my cousin Jerry's house, and I did my show for them. And it was kind of a one-off until I came home the next day, and one of the kids at the party said, "Hey, I want Robert the Great for my birthday." So the next thing you knew, I was in business. So I said, "What do I charge?" And I go, we get $5 a show, and the parent would pick me up, take me, and drop me back home. And that was my little business. And I actually did a lot of shows I made up flyers and I stuck them in all the goodie bags. And, little by little, I got lots of little shows doing birthday parties. So I did that for a long time.
Yeah. How do you then parlay that experience into this walking tour, I mean, it just doesn't happen overnight. You have to put a lot of time and effort. And you talked about, getting the cart together and and scoping out potential places in the city where you could take the tour. So how does one dive headfirst into making this a business for yourself?
Yeah. So, well, you just start. I mean, I know how to make a magic show. I've done that for many, many years. Um, and you just start looking at locations and you get an inspiration. And I'll tell you, like talking with friends and family and all this sort of stuff. So one that has not come to fruition yet, but I love the idea. There are Isaiah Zagar murals all over. He's the guy that did the Magic Garden.
Yep.
There are murals all over the city. And a common magic trick is to pull coins out of the air, right? So my daughter said to me, hey, wouldn't it be great if you could pull pottery out of one of his murals and then turn that into a teacup or something? So I worked on that trick quite a bit. And I really wanted to find a mural of his and incorporate it into the tour. But it just doesn't fit in the geography of what areas we have to cover. But that's the kind of concept. I walked around. I passed, it's called Welcome Park, which is right across from City Tavern. Yep. So as a kid, I used to pass that square all the time, never paid any attention to it. And now with the tour, I gave it a good eye and I looked at it. And it turns out that plaza is a map of the old city, Philadelphia, as laid out by William Penn. And when you get into it, the first three streets are misnamed. Mulberry Street is Arch Street, Sassafras Street is Ray Street, and High Street is Market Street. And I go into the history of that and explain what happened with each street. So that's my little history. And then I resurrect William Penn, and he debates what I just said. And then I do a prediction mentalism trick with William, with an alter ego there. So all these things just blend together, so it just took walking around and thinking and coming up with, and then that was a trick that I knew I wanted to do. I didn't know how to do it. So I took a deep dive into all the magic books I owned and friends, and just kept talking and thinking and iterating. And, that's why it took 2 years.
We should mention that you are quite an accomplished magician. I mean, I don't know what I was watching recently, and I found out that there was actually a Philadelphia Houdini magic club. And first of all, I think everybody's familiar in some shape or form with Harry Houdini. I didn't know that there was a Philadelphia Houdini magic club, but you actually received an award from the club because of your magic. That is quite an honor to get that award from that club. So at first I was like, I never heard of this club, but now this sort of comes full circle for me because here you were honored by that organization. What was that like for you?
Well, that was a while ago. The club is no longer in operation, but that was back just about 85, I think, something like that. And I was a young kid that was, coming through, and every year it's sort of like the Stanley Cup of Magic in Philadelphia for me. Every year they would compete for this trophy. The trophy was actually donated to the club by Bess Houdini, who was his wife. And she was very fond of the club. And she donated a lithograph plate and several other items that were all bronze sheets. And they were bound in a leather book, which was beautifully carved out with Houdini's likeness and all this stuff. And then if you won for that year, you had your name put in there, the trick you won for, and your year. And there were brass plates in the back with everybody's name for every year that they won. And I competed, I think, for 3 or 4 years. And actually, there was judges were lay people. And I know one was always a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer. And I don't remember who the other 2 lay people were, but it was 3 panels, a panel of 3 judges. And you competed, and everybody brought their A game for this, for this show. And actually won the very last year that the club was in existence. Wow. So I got the book. I had this bit of coveted magic history. And then the club ended and I was left with the book. So I had this very unique, and very special thing. And there was a gentleman in the club, his name was Jack Channon, and he had won, he was a professional magician, he was older. He had won more than anybody else. So the guy that got me started in magic called me up and said, give the book to Jack. He wants it as his keepsake. So that's what I did. I gave it back to him. And I don't know where it is today, but if I could find it, I would donate it to the Society of American Magicians, which is a thriving chapter of a magic club, and it has chapters all over. The Philly branch is very good, and I would put it back in circulation to be competed for again. We have our own competitions there, but that's a nice prize to add in.
You talked about, at the age of 10 and how you got started. It's also my understanding that you actually watched Penn and Teller perform their magic at Head House Square back in the day. That was, I'm assuming that's before Penn and Teller took off to be these international superstars that they are today. So what was, I actually interviewed one of them. Obviously, you interview the one that talks, the one that didn't talk. I guess it was it Penn Jillette?
Yeah, Penn Jillette
that came out with, right. He came out with his memoir many years ago, and so he came in to Philadelphia, and I actually interviewed him. And so, what was that like to watch them when they were relatively, not on anybody's radar screen, but to actually see them do their business in Head House Square?
Well, right away you knew that they were destined for greatness. They from the get-go, they had the chops, they had the sort of the brilliance, and they were new and they were unique. And at the time, they were part of a trio. They were called Asparagus Valley Cultural Society. And they did shows around the area. And Penn and Teller were the two that used to have the Sidewalk Wonder Show. Penn would juggle, and Teller would do his apple, and the needles in the apple, where you swallow the thread, and then you swallow needles, and then he chewed up the apple, and then he swallowed everything, and then he regurgitated it so that it was just a thread, and on the thread were all the needles.
Oh, wow.
And he had people inspecting his mouth with dental tools in the crowd. It was a magnificent trick. He still performs it today, I believe.
Wow.
And they were gracious. I mean, I would juggle a little bit with Penn. He would let us do that after everybody left. And he knew we were fans, and we would hang out, and they were just really great. And they were really wonderful to watch and see the way they approach things. The more you examine them, the more you learn.
Yeah. Not every magic trick is the same. And I think every magician, or maybe they are the same. It's just the magician who puts his or her own spin on it. I mean, are there a set number of magic tricks? I mean, there are these shows that come on TV, and everybody tries to push the envelope, if you will, when it comes to magic tricks. I mean, they get crazier and more bizarre and more outlandish. But are all the I mean, what is the premise, I guess, for a good magic trick?
Well, I think it's anything where you can get a audience member to care. That is the essence of what makes a good magic trick. If you do something and the person is ambivalent, you don't get their emotions invested in some way, you don't tell them a good story, it's hard. You're at a lower level. That said, there are some tricks, and this is interesting because there's some tricks that by themselves, even the worst performers, they're still great tricks. There are other tricks that need more presentational help to sell to the audience. So there's a continuum of levels as far as the trick goes and the presentation. But at the end of the day, I think it's all about the performer. The trick is the thing you do, but the performer creates the performance.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the walking tour, the current tour that you're conducting. I mean, people could go to your website, phillymagictours.com. Is that correct? Okay. Right. And they could sign up and get their tickets or whatever for, and then is there a certain meeting place then that you meet these people that sign up for the tour? Give me an idea of how the tour progresses from start to finish. And it's my understanding that it's about an hour and 15 minutes from start to finish?
Correct. It varies plus or minus depending on the size of the group. I've had as many as about
Yeah.
45 people during the Fringe one time. And sometimes I get a bus tour. So, I'll have a good load that way. Sometimes you get a off weekend. I'm still figuring out social media. Sometimes I'll get 10 people in the tour.
I think
Right.
we all are.
So when you have a large tour, it might go an hour and a half. If you have a small group and they walk fast, it's an hour and 10. But we start behind the Bourse, as I said, which is at 4th and Randstead, just north of Chestnut Street. That would be. Most
Okay.
people know the Bourse locally. And I do that because there's a water fountain and there's bathrooms and all that stuff. And I just say a quick hello there. And then the next thing I do is walk down to Chestnut Street. So I'm at 4th and Chestnut. And from that corner, you can see the second Bank of the United States of America. And actually, I could give you the first trick. It's very quick. Would you like to?
Okay.
This will
Sure.
explain a lot. So I say to everybody, hey, what are you looking at over there? So it's the second Bank of the United States of America. And I say, when you think of a bank, what do you think of, Paul? What do you think of when you think of a bank?
Money.
Money, exactly. So I researched the history of money in the United States of America. And these might be hard to see. This is a reproduction of a 25-cent note from the state of Florida. And this is a 10-cent note from Newark, New Jersey. Just get the idea. $2 from Chattanooga, $5 from Louisiana, and $3 from the Bank of New England. So that's the way money was. These are true reproductions, and that's the way money was. But in 1862, they passed a law, and like magic, you got the common currency.
Wow.
And that's the way the show starts off. And that's an explanation of the tour in a nutshell, because every location inspires a magic trick. So I go from there to down Chestnut Street, down 3rd Street. We go to the First Bank of America. We stop at Franklin's house. We stop at City Tavern, the plaza that I mentioned. Then we go up 2nd Street all the way to Arch Street, over Arch Street to Betsy Ross's house and Girard Fountain Park, and we end there. And every stop is a trick along the way.
Wow. And I just want to mention that there was no editing involved. Trust me, no editing involved in that trick. You did it. We actually wanted to do this in the studio, but for whatever reason, we just couldn't make it happen. But I was looking at him, and I'm like watching every move that he's making, and right there in front of our eyes, he takes the reproduction of old currency and he makes it into the currency that we're all familiar with today. What is the so do you? I guess are the tours on a regular schedule, or I mean, I guess weather has a lot to do with it. In the winter months, perhaps maybe you don't have as many tours because of the cold or the precipitation or whatever.
Right. So I have a season. Basically somewhere I kind of look at the weather, but usually I'm kicking it off somewhere early May, and I'm this year I'm going to mid-November. So I have November 4th this Saturday, and November 11th is the last day, because I just figure it's going to be too cold after that. I've actually done it when it's been pretty cold, and I've dropped a few things.
Yeah.
My fingers get a little numb, and it's a little hard to do some of the tricks. So I've actually practiced outside in cold weather just to make sure it wasn't so alien to me. Like the moisture in your fingers goes away. There's just different things. You need moisturizer, little tricks of the trade to try and deal with the elements. So, because I do a couple sleight of hand tricks during the tour.
You haven't made anybody disappear during a tour, intentionally or unintentionally.
That's exactly right. But so I have a planning summit with my wife, I call it, where we sit down and discuss the entire summer, spring, summer, and fall, and what weekends are available. This past year, our son got married, so there was a number of weekends, which was great. Thank you very much, and that was a wonderful time off. And then we went back to it. So whatever we know, we take breaks for, and then we fit the schedule in around that.
Your son didn't push you into action to perform, at the wedding ceremony or at the reception?
No. he grew up with this. It's just commonplace for him.
Yeah. The concept is unique. It's amazing. It's getting rave reviews. So where, Robert, do you see this going in the future? I mean, what would you like to do? It's great to run these tours, but what else would you like to do? What's the next chapter for you?
Yeah, well, so that's a great question. So several things. One, with the tour, I noticed there's a lot of bus tours that come to Philly. So this year I started marketing just actually in the break when this season ends, I will start to market to bus tours for next year. I think that'll be a nice addition to this. And maybe in time I'll bring somebody on if it grows enough. And, there are other magicians in the Philly area that are excellent. Maybe somebody else will want to get involved a little bit. So that's a possibility. But aside from that, there's an off season. And I did a show for the Philadelphia Fringe a couple of years ago. I've always wanted to do an hour-long adult show. And I started that in 2018. I did a number of shows for the Philly Fringe. It was great, but there were friends in the audience that knew me. And I felt like, I'm doing a high school show. Everybody was applauding before I did anything. So I didn't know it was any good or not. So
Yeah.
I went to the New York Fringe and I did the Frigid Fringe there. And I walked out on stage and of course, crickets, nobody knew me. And I had to win them over. So that was an hour show. And by the end, I was very happy with the applause and the response. And there was a lot of good back and forth. So that was a pretty solid experience. And from there, now that I've been doing the tour, I'm sort of getting noticed by some of the magic community in the Philly area. So I was asked not long ago to do an opening for another magician at Smoke and Mirrors Magic Theater in Huntington Valley. And I did that, and the owners liked that. And they asked me to come back. So December 16th of this year, I'm actually headlining at Smoke and Mirrors Theater, which I'm in great company because the people that perform there are people that have been on Penn and Teller or Masters of Illusion or America's Got Talent. So I like to think I'm a very good company with that. And it's a wonderful theater. Put a plug in for that. At Smoke and Mirrors Magic Theater, December 16th in Huntington Valley.
We just have a few minutes left in our program. We can go on talking for an hour here, but I think people come out, they see you, they take the tour. I think everybody is, from again the reviews that I've read, thoroughly entertained. They're informed, but I'm guessing there's that one question, that the burning question that many people have is, Robert, how did you do that? Everybody wants to know. They want to peek behind the curtain. They want to look behind and see how it is that you do that. So I guess that's what makes a magician special, is that he doesn't necessarily tell the tale of the trick. I mean, that's what makes him a magician. So is that pretty much the number one question you get, is how do you do that, Robert?
Yeah, I would say you certainly get that, but I spending a lot of time on that issue. I actually look at it in several ways. The moment of magic, it's always built into us just to have a gasp. And it's a wonderful moment. And after that, that's common. Everybody does that. But after that, it separates between the people that want to know and the people that don't want to know. Some people just like to linger and let the mystery hang. And then there's the people that want to know. And then of the people that want to know, some are very satisfied by the method if they figure it out or they think they figured it out. And some are very let down because, it turns out that sometimes it's not that interesting. And it was much more interesting to let it, just linger and have that sense of wonder. So anymore, if anybody really wants to know, they can find everything on the internet. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Does that hurt or help you as a magician and your colleagues? I mean, yeah, you can find anything out on the internet, whether you're looking for it or not. But does that impact your ability to run these tours and go out and do what it is that you do?
I don't think so. When I was a kid, I don't know if Doug Henning is still in the zeitgeist of the world too much, but he was quite a big magician in the day. So he was on the cover of Time magazine, and he was doing a levitation in his show. And when Time Magazine published that article, they put a little sidebar panel in the bottom that showed a method from like 1890 or something. It was a levitation, and they just showed it as an explanation of how something used to be done. And I'm sure that people didn't realize that in the show, Doug Henning was using that method. And the lay people didn't make the connection between, oh, that's how it's done, to hey, he's doing that in the show. So you're pretty safe, believe me. I mean, you could expose whatever you want, and maybe somebody knows, but for the most part, when you dress it up and you perform it, you add enough subtleties and touches in there that it goes right by.
You said dress it up. Are you the stereotypical magician with the cape and the top hat and
no, this is I do wear a vest just to stand out a little, but the shirt here says the Philadelphia Comedy Magic Walking Tour. I either wear a Phillies cap or a Phillies cap or an Eagles cap to represent the city. And that's it. I walk around and I have short sleeves. I don't have, I try to dispel the kind of up his sleeve and all that sort of stuff. I like to do it right, like this sort of thing, right? There's not much going on there. That hits you pretty hard. Yeah. So I just like things that are what I consider hard-hitting magic, tricks that aren't proppy. They seem like an ordinary object and something miraculous happens. And I spent a lot of time trying to get the caliber of the trick up.
Yeah. People can find out more information about Robert and his trade. They can go to phillymagictours.com, and you can find out the entire schedule, more about Robert. And Robert, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the program. Fascinating stuff and continued success. Best of luck to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. It was a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, that's wraps this edition of the Philly Factor up. Until the next time, I'm Paul Perrello. Have a great one. We'll catch you on the next show.